Welcome, my brujas and brujos. Today is going to be a very, very interesting topic, and I think it's about time this topic is even discussed. I think it's about time we even bring it to the table, because I have so many English-speaking servitors that are struggling learning Spanish, that are struggling to understand Creole, that are struggling to even understand the basis of what is voodoo and how to serve the spirits. So I think one of the biggest questions that I have constantly heard teaching many people is, can the Loa speak English? And oftentimes during my ceremonies, I have a translator there. I have people that are able to speak all these languages when trans happens, so that everyone is able to fluently communicate with the Loa. But a constant question that I get is, can the Loa speak English? I'm going to start this off with a very historical perspective just to open everyone's mind. And I will also say that I have had so many arguments with elders in this religion, specifically amongst Dominican elders, because a lot of the elders in voodoo that practice the 21 divisions, they always argue with me that no, the Loa cannot speak English. But I always ask them this very mind-opening question, and they could never seem to answer it correctly. Although I know the answer, and I want everyone to have their own answer if this resonates with you too. Now, let's start, and I digress, back to Africa. When the Africans were brought over here, the Arara specifically, the Fon and the Ewe that brought us voodoo, they did not speak Spanish. But somehow, now, a lot of our voodoo Loa, when they come down now, they speak Spanish, okay? And a lot of them also speak Creole, because again, we started from the African language, and then, the Taino and the African language, that was a mix of its own. As the Africans were forced to speak Spanish, they would also speak some Creole, which was a way of also keeping and inheriting the African language and bringing it over. As more people began to be fluent in Spanish, Creole began to be lost, and the Loa began to adapt to the language and the culture that was the Dominican Republic and what Dominicans were creating on the islands and the Caribbean islands. Same thing, nuances, new words, new items, everything changed on the islands. But this did not stop the Loa from communicating with people. And I say all of this to say because a lot of people forget that our Loa came from Africa, and in Africa, you don't speak Spanish. You speak Spanish in Latin America and in Spanish-speaking countries, but that doesn't stop the Loa from speaking those languages. And my second point is, a lot of people seem to forget also that when you mount a Loa will have to use the capabilities that belong to that caballo or to that servitor, meaning if all the language that that person can speak is English and everyone in the room is speaking English, you also have to consider that how is the Loa going to communicate with people that will never understand Spanish, you see? So I always bring this topic of conversation up to older elders, and they always tell me, oh, then that's not a Loa, that's something else. And I'm like, well, you people are forgetting that the Loa have vueltas. For those of you that don't know what a vuelta is the various aspects of a Loa. For example, Marta has 9. And I say this because all 9 aspects have a story to tell of the various ways that Malta is worshipped around the world. For example, Ezilikenwa is the oldest, actual, purest form of Santa Marta la Dominadora. Ezilikenwa also is one of the oldest Loa that when she comes down, she does not speak Spanish, she does not speak Creole, she speaks purely Fon Ewe, or, her native tongue. And a lot of people don't understand her, which is why she's rare to come through. But that is a vuelta that you will find in Africa. And I say this to say because, again, this is why we have various vueltas of the same Loa. Because it accommodates the language, the culture, and the differences of everyone that worships that Loa. So, for example, in the Dominican Republic, you will find Santa Marta la Dominadora, you will find Lubana Filomens. In Haiti, you will find in America, Mami Wata, you will find in Africa also, Mami Wata. And again, these vueltas of the same Loa just come up to accommodate the language and the culture that resonates with the people that need them most, because the Loa all change to our needs. And that's really what I wanted to come on this live about. So when people tell me, oh, Santa Marta la Dominadora speaks Spanish, yes, of course she does. But she also doesn't speak English. But that's only because that vuelta doesn't speak English. Similarly, Anais Pie doesn't speak English. But I will not be surprised if we're sticking with Martha. I wouldn't be surprised if someone tells me another Vuelta with a different name speaks English and that is Martha. It's very possible. Again, bringing back the point that our Loa used to speak African languages. They never spoke Spanish, but they accommodated the needs of their followers in order to communicate with their people. Another point I'd like to make, and this is another mind-opening concept, is if we were enslaved today in 2020, if we were enslaved and taken to India, sticking with Martha, and I cannot take any of my Loa with me, meaning my statue stayed behind, taken to India during a slave trade, for me, Martha would easily be Kali. And I would call her Santa Marta la Kali, because Kali is the closest thing to Martha. Natural hair out, naked, even though that's not how my Martha came down in India. That's the closest relative. And it's the same thing how Africans saw the Catholic saints and syncretized them. It may have not been Ezilik and Wa, but that Saint Martha of Betania was the closest thing they got. You know what I mean? So every single Loa, when you need to hide it behind a different religion, which was how our voodoo survived, that saint had to accommodate the language, the culture, the differences, and everything. So that entire aspect, say for example, I went to India, right? We all got shipped to India. Now it's Santa Marta la Kali, for example. I wouldn't be surprised if that Kali speaks to me in English or something that accommodates the followers that came with me. You know what I mean? So I say all of this to say, is it possible? Yes, it's possible. But the Loa that I know do not speak English. However, I do not put it past them that they can speak English in a different Vuelta. So, let's talk about Vueltas. Vueltas are specifically, you can say, avatars. There is one Martha or one Loa, but there are various aspects or avatars of the same spirit, if that makes sense. So, for example, Marta currently has 9 in voodoo. I wouldn't be surprised, however, if the more she begins to evolutionize herself and be known around the world, she will go from having 9 vueltas to 13 to probably 21 someday. And that is only because each vuelta, again, accommodates the various populaces that are worshiping her, the various cultures that are intermixing with this Loa, and the various languages that are meeting this Loa as well. Because again, the Loa evolutionize with us, depending on what the servitors, are going through or where they're at, and if the language is also being evolved. For example, you go to Africa, Mami Wata will not speak with the same nuances or even the same words that we use in Dominican culture. Not even the same phrases or the same humor will be the same, but it'll be the same energy or the same similarities because again, it is one Loa with various avatars. And you will find that aspect or that vuelta here and there. I've never been to New Orleans, but I don't doubt that in New Orleans there are Loa that will again accommodate the English-speaking community. And again, a lot of elders like to tell me, oh no, that's not the Loa. Yes, it can be the Loa. The Loa are not stupid. Number one, the Gedes are all the dead. You don't think the dead speak? You don't think the dead learn from each other? Baron of the cemetery literally is the first man dead in every single cemetery. He is one of the oldest Loa. Every knowledge that came from humanity, he has. He has the secrets, he has the wisdom, he has the languages. Legba is him and Legba are 2 of the main gatekeepers. They're the ones that introduce people to voodoo. Baron goes to people when it's traditional, when it's tradition, when it's ancestral work. Legba introduces people from around the world into voodoo. You don't think he speaks various languages? You don't think Baron speaks various languages? Of course they do. I haven't, met many Loa that spoke English to me, but I absolutely know that there are vueltas to every single Loa. And the reason why they have vueltas is because, again, they grow, they evolve with time, with their people. They're not going to leave their people behind just because their people cannot speak Spanish or cannot speak Creole. They're not going to do that. The Loa do not abandon us. In fact, we need each other. We need our Loa, they need us. They need light. They need, the remembrance. They need the honor. We need their help, their blessings, our roads to be open, their healing. We literally need each other. You know what I mean? And then together, our Loa with us as humans, we come together to worship God together. So realistically, we cannot be without each other. So the Loa will accommodate our needs and we must accommodate theirs. Now let's talk about some Loa that I know, and have spoken to me. Because, oh, by the way, before I even get there, I have a client who is Albanian, for example. She's Muslim. She is not and never was introduced to voodoo culture. For those of you that personally know her, especially my godkids that have met her, she has come to express the dreams that she's had with Believelkan and with various Loa. The way that these Loa talk to her in her dreams and in her sleep, even sometimes when they appear to her, is in English. They will speak to her in English because they obviously can't speak to her in Spanish for her to retain that information and then come to me and be like, yo, can you translate this? She's not going to remember that. So the Loa, in order for them to speak to you, they will speak to you in a language that you will understand. These Loa are very powerful, and I feel like something as minuscule as language barriers doesn't exist in the world of voodoo. Only because these Loa, again, are extremely powerful. They're not going to allow for language barriers to get in the way. Now, I digress now. There are some Loa aspects or vueltas that do not speak English. So when they come down identifying as that vuelta and they speak English, I'll question it. For example, Anaisa Pie Dantor should not be speaking English. Okay? Mambo Metres Anaisa Pie Daume shouldn't be speaking English. Because, for example, Anaisa Pie Dantor would come down and she likes to work, for example, with fire. She likes to work with blades. She likes to work with metal. This is all resonating with the Petro aspect of Anaisa Pie during slavery. During times of slavery, they spoke Creole, they spoke French, and they definitely spoke Spanish. Those are all vueltas of that avatar of Anaisa Pie. So literally, depending on the vuelta, of course. Now, if, for example, someone came to me someday and told me, Metres Anais Smith, just throwing it out there, right? Because us as followers, in order to understand what's coming before us, we like to name our Loa or give them a name. And in the culture, we definitely make that pact with that Loa to be like, is this an appropriate name for you? And they may agree or be accepting of that. If someone was to tell me someday, Metres Mambo Anais Smith, right? Because that is an American last name. I would be like, oh, so this is definitely an English-speaking Anaisa, a vuelta of Anaisa Pie. And I'd be like, oh, okay, what's good? Mama's like, hi, what's good? And I would learn about this new vuelta of Anaisa Pie. I wouldn't treat that vuelta like I would Metres Anaisa Pie Dantor, because they are not the same. Very different. And that's something that also is important to understand. When you are meeting every single vuelta of a single Loa, you have to respect each respectively with their likes and dislikes, because they're all different. Their likes and dislikes. Every single avatar also has a way of speaking, such as the humor, the phrases, the way that they speak. Ezili Freda Dahome, I've seen her speak Creole, French, and Fon. And I'm just like, ooh, that's a fiery one. Because me personally, I'm still learning Fon and Ewe. Those languages, it's hard in your 20s when you are finally learning a new language. Because as an adult, to retain that information, you gotta repeat it, digest it, apply it, and then translate it when you hear it. And then respond appropriately. It is hard. Two aspects can be present in one head, and it can also be present in two heads. I have seen it personally firsthand. In one head, you will notice that two aspects are different when the person mounted will identify as both. And you will see that person falling in and out of trance as those aspects are taking turns on one head. It can be very traumatic because at sometimes people don't even know who they're talking to. They could be speaking to Ezili Kenwa. They could be speaking to La Colora. They could be speaking to it can be stressful, and so it can happen. Now, two aspects of the same Loa can also be in the same room. For example, somebody can be mounted with Ezili Fredada Home and somebody else mounted with Metresili. And that has happened. Typically because, again, the same energy has the same essence, and if the room is pure and it is pleasing to the same Loa, that will drag them both down, especially if the altar contains a service appropriately done for those avatars, which is also why during a ceremony, and this usually happens during Dia de Fiesta or Manis, which is when the altar is completely dedicated to the Loa or the division, you have to have everything ready for whoever may come down. So for example, you will have a cup of Corona with, I don't want to give too many details, but a cup of Corona and something that y'all should know what goes inside for Ana Isapie, along with, a hidden blade underneath a sheath of something gold for her other aspect. You would need a cup of honey with brown sugar. You will need bread with molasses. All of these services point to a specific vuelta of Ana Isapie, for example, and on her feast day, that should all be present on the same altar. And that is what brings down various vueltas and can also make various people in the room mounted by the same Loa but different vueltas. Finally speaking on it, because yes, I've seen it. I don't come from a background of Santeria, so if anyone in Santeria wishes to correct me, I'm open to it, but I have also been told that two caminos of Ochun can also mount. In other words, an Orisha can have various caminos also present in one ceremony, and various people have told me that. I don't know how true that is, but I'm just correlating the two religions to show you guys that this is a very African thing. You see, so even with us in Voodoo, there is one Martha, but she has various vueltas. And there also is, for example, one Ochun, correct me if I'm wrong, but she has various caminos. Now, the difference between vueltas and caminos, and when I'm speaking on caminos, trust me, I'm not initiated in Santeria. I haven't even received anything in Santeria. This is all word of mouth from my godmother and other of my friends that are in Santeria, but I have been educated in the sense that caminos are past lives or various of the same Orisha with different names. And vueltas in Voodoo, which this is my background, vueltas in Voodoo for us is more so aspects of the same divinity. So it is but one divinity, and some of them can be or have been alive, and they were associated with the same Loa, but most of all, it comes from one divinity, and it is simply aspects or moods of the same divinity. And depending on the mood, the culture, and the background of that vuelta is where we get vueltas from, and I hope that's clear. Can two aspects of the same Loa not get along if they're present in the same room? Yes. If you fuck up an altar setup, meaning, for example, because this is usually when it does happen, if you put in the 21 divisions Ana Isapie next to Ana Isapie Tantor, oh bitch, you're setting up for war. Same thing, if you put Metre Sili or Ezili Freda next to Ezili Dantor, you are setting up for war. The reason being is, and if you guys notice, the altars in Haiti as well as in Dominican Republic and in Puerto Rico, when it comes to voodoo, the altars are always divided. You guys notice that? The reason for that is because the altars represent the energy, the vibration, and also the type of work that the Loa does. So typically Loas that work on the ground have a very grounded energy, but they can also have a very dark energy because they're close to the ground, representing that they work with the dead, they work with the roots, they work with ground level. For those of you that understand vibration, ground level energy also means neutrality, boredom, sadness, depression, anxiety, all of those low vibrating energies. So a lot of the Gedes understand how to work with those energies to benefit you. So when they're on the ground, those spirits can work for the good and for the bad. And typically, they're very fucking good at it. That's why the altar is divided. And the ones on top, for example, or La División Rada or La División Blanca, they're more so concerned with your spiritual growth, your safety, your family matters, healing. They're definitely here to guide. They're here to protect. They're here to, give love and resolve for you and break witchcraft. So their concerns are upon high magic, and they're very ceremonial. So they're not concerned more so with the things that these guys are concerned with. So when it comes to you putting, for example, a Loa that belongs here with these guys up here, that's why they fight. So two aspects of the same Loa cannot be together. And that is why I tell people who are coming from other religions like paganism or Wicca, you cannot, just because they're aspects, put them together or, combine them, because they're separated for a reason. And it's usually for safety reasons, and it's also because their moods and their personalities clash. For example, I've seen Ezili Dantor fight with Metre Sili or Ezili Freda, and it's usually because, again, Ezili Freda is more loving, more, bougie, for lack of better word. She's more, high maintenance, and Ezili Dantor is more like, revolutionary. She's protective, she's aggressive, she can even be violent, and she's also okay with being around tobacco and rum, whereas Ezili Freda, Maître Sili in the 21 Divisions, she wants nothing to do with blood, violence, sex, or any of that. You know what I mean? She's very pure. So imagine putting a pure, let's use church woman, next to, a warrior. Come on, they're gonna go at it. You know what I mean? And at some point, their differences are just gonna go at it. So during a ceremony, that does happen when people fuck up at the altar, though. That's the only times when two energies can come down at the same time and they collide. Same thing on the altar of the 21 Divisions. During a ceremony, you never want to light the Indians next to the Gedes or the Indians next to the Petro. Oh man, that's just war. Like, that is just war. So you got to be careful. Pretty much that is what I wanted to clarify. So I hope this really helped answer some questions. I myself have never worked with, and this is, just my personal experience. I would love to meet a vuelta of a Loa that comes to me speaking English, because I'm usually involved with the elders, and all of the elders seldom speak English. So when they come to me, they speak Spanish. And unfortunately, that's also why they grew up around Spanish-speaking communities, so they don't believe in the idea that a Loa can speak English. But again, if you begin to go further, Middle America, or further, down south, you will find people working with Loa speaking English. And again, you get used to people working the same way that you believe, oh, this is what it is, and it can never evolve or grow. And truly, I've also had to grow out of that mentality, because I started to see various people working the altars, and they're getting the same results, only speaking English. So I've had to also grow myself and get out of that mentality that the Loa can only speak Spanish, when I thought back and I'm like, holy shit, in Africa, they was all speaking Fon, Ewe, Arara. There was no such thing as Spanish. So being that there was no such thing in Spanish, but now there is, and the Loa do speak Spanish now, I can't take away the fact that yes, probably someday, like it is in other parts of the world, the Loa speak English for their followers. We just gotta be honest, you know what I mean? Like, they didn't speak Spanish in the beginning, but they speak Spanish now. The Petro can also work very closely to the Gedes, because again, fiery spirits do very well with death. So the Gedes, at least in my tradition, the Gedes and the Petro go together. They can go on the same altar. For example, also in my culture, Rada, Nago, Belkane, Legbane all go together. The only ones that don't intermix with nobody are the Indians. The Indians are the only ones that they're completely to their own side. And realistically, it's because the Sweetwater's division, has its own tradition. That is actually the original native spirituality. So in order to preserve it, it is not mixed with African elements or Catholic elements. You will not see, and shouldn't see, an Indian altar or a Sweetwater's altar with Jesus or a Catholic saint on it, or even a Loa next to them. Because again, it is to preserve native spirituality that in Voodoo, specifically the 21 Divisions, we don't mix them with anybody. And that again is just to preserve ancient tradition. Whereas we also have, for example, the Gedes and the Petros that we keep exclusively with a lot of African presence and African, elements, just to preserve African tradition. You will find, however, the only ones that are very mixed with Catholic imagery are the Rada or la División Blanca. That includes Anaísa, Belia Belcan. You will find so many white elements, so many, European elements on there. And that is because, A, they're okay with it, and B, it represents, just the intermixing of these various traditions. Which is also why on the white division, you can see Indian elements on Anaísa. You can see on the white division African elements on Belia Belcan. You can see all of these elements coming together for the white division. But exclusively, the traditions are, the more you go to the ground, the Petros and the Guedes, very African. The Indians, very native. You know what I mean? So if any of you guys have any questions, I hope I was able to answer precisely a lot of these questions for the lot of you. But I digress. I've never experienced the Loa to speak English, but if I can, perhaps learn how other people work with the Loa, I would love that. Because a lot of my friends and a lot of, my godchildren do not understand Creole, do not understand Spanish. So I am limited to how I can work with them because the vueltas that I was initiated into, they only speak Creole, Fon, Ewe, and Spanish. So I'm a little limited there, and I always have to, at my ceremonies, have my plas translating. And by the way, for those of you that don't know, a plas in the 21 divisions is essentially someone that helps the mounted or helps the individual mounted by the Loa serve the spirits and also serve the community. I just don't know how they do it here in America, and I never knew how they did it here in America, but I would still love to learn how Loa worship has been changing over the years. I hope I gave you guys some insights also with how things would be also different if we were all to go to India. Take us to Greece, Martha would be Medusa, because snakes, right? They have to have some kind of similarity in order to be syncretized. Snakes, snake head, she would probably be called Marta la Celosa, right? Or Marta la Piedra, which is Martha the envious, or Martha the stoning, or something like that. Like, there's always a name that accommodates the new culture, the new vuelta, everything, but we still retain all the other vueltas to understand where our Loa originally came from, right? Now, that African spirituality is loving. It is very evolutionary. It is accepting of different traditions. It is accepting of different paths. I think to believe that voodoo will deny some language or some culture is incorrect, because voodoo never denied Christianity, and it was what oppressed us. Why would voodoo be more accepting of something that never oppressed us, whereas we're accepting of something that actually did? So voodoo will never be against adapting, against growth. And I really do believe that, yes, the conservative voodooistans that I have met, I just really think that they just grew up a certain way. They only, want to believe that it is what it is, or for them, that's their truth. But in all reality, I know my Loa and have known my Loa for long enough that I know that they are so intelligent and they are so loving. They will easily accommodate your needs. They did it for us on the islands. They did it for Americans. They did it for Black Americans that lost their African language and were forced to speak the colonizer language. They will do it for anybody. So, luz y progreso. I hope this video was everything you guys had hoped for. I hope this also shed some light, because a lot of people have been wondering, can they pray in English to their Loa? The answer is yes. Your Loa can respond in English. Your Loa probably can respond better in English when you understand them. And you can also pray however and whatever language you speak at your altar. Luz y progreso. I love you guys a lot.